Welcome to the Chronicles of Gamers. This is a podcast where we express our love-hate relationship with video games. But today we have a special guest for episode
45,870.
That's right. But really it's episode
45.
Yes. So welcome. I'm with my co-host, Executioner.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing golden, man. It's a great, beautiful Sunday day. You know, I've had my fun at ASEN, had my fun in general.
Bravo, bravo. Absolutely, because we have two special guests with us today.
Yeah, we do.
I would like for you to give a round of applause
Woo!
to the magnanimous Josh Davis
What's up?
and the infamous Chris Bowles.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, wait, hold up. Forgot the most important guy, man. There you go, man. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah, so welcome. How are both of you guys doing?
Yeah, how you guys?
Good. Doing good.
Josh?
Me too.
Josh?
Yeah.
Doing great.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful day.
We really do
We're going-
appreciate it. I know you guys have busy schedules, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, without further ado, we're actually just going to hop right into the interview because we know that's what the listeners want. They want to know who these lovely gentlemen are, why they're here, where they come from. So, Executioner, I'm going to pass it on to you.
All right, thank you so much. So, Josh and Chris, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourselves before we start digging in to the nitty gritty?
Do you want to go first, Josh?
Sure, that's fine with me.
Okay.
26 years old. My name's Josh. I moved here from Sacramento in 2014 to pursue my career in the game industry.
Okay.
I've been working in the 3D world since 2012, so I've been creating stuff. Currently, I'm on an indie game project, and I did a few game jams, and I led a team that didn't work out so well, but I learned a lot. So that's about it.
Okay. Chris?
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Bowles. I go by the development moniker of Arcade Renegade. I am 27 years old. I am born and raised here in the San Fernando Valley, California, sunny Los Angeles. And I am a computer scientist. So my formal education is computer science. I graduated with my bachelor's from Cal State Northridge in 2014. And I'll be graduating with my master's in computer science this summer, 2017.
Nice.
Josh and I were both presidents of the CSUN Game Development Club. Josh was president from fall 16 semester, and I was the president for the spring 17 semester. In addition to that, I was also an intern at Yacht Club Games down in Marina del Rey for 5 months from this January to this May, just last week.
Okay.
So while I was there, I made small contributions to the Shovel Knight project, in specific Shovel Knight Spectre of Torment, which is out now on all major platforms, including the Switch. So I'm credited there as a minor contributor. And yeah, so I learned a lot while I was at the company there.
Okay. So my first question for both of you guys is, what inspired you for you, Josh, to work in the video game industry as, in general, and Chris, since you're also a computer science major and you've done an intern, what was your choice? Like, why?
Well, the short answer is I wanted to be a video game developer ever since I was a little kid. The long one is I've always loved video games, and it drove me to play with my friends, to basically get out of the house more, to go over to my friend's house, interact with them. And I loved it. I love video games, and I always had great respect for the people who made them. I just became more and more curious about how that was done, and it just collided with my passion for art, and the rest is history.
Chris?
So my experience in game development actually dates back 12 years from now, back to around 2005 when I was in the middle of high school. Growing up, I always wanted to be a comic book illustrator. I always doodled and drawed like a majority of art people. I wouldn't really consider myself so much an art person nor a techie person, so I guess I would consider myself somewhere of a hybrid, somewhere within that blurred gradient. But yeah, growing up, I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. I always drew like random stuff. Pokemon was the first game that I grew up on in elementary school, so I go all the way back to the original red and blue versions, and have played pretty much all of them ever since, yellow, gold, silver, crystal, all the way up to just recently Sun and Moon.
Okay.
So it's about 20 years of video gaming right there. But what actually shifted me from going the artistic route to more the computer software development route was, for those of you who grew up on the old Pokemon games on Game Boy, Game Boy Color, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Game Shark, which was like a cheating device. So you'd use it to get like Mew or Missing No or like a million rare candies, etc. I got really into that. And so it came to the point where I was starting to make my own custom Game Shark codes for editing positions in memory, different values, getting like 99. And it wasn't just for Pokemon, but it was for other Game Boy games as well. So that was kind of my first exposure to hacking, I guess you could call it. But more so importantly, base 16 hexadecimal digits. So learning how to convert between, the base 10 numbers, base 16. That was kind of my first real exposure and kind of set me on the path of, hey, making this is really cool. Could I go a step further and actually, design and develop, these actual kind of games with my own rules, my own designs, etc. So that's what kind of set me on the path in 2005. Ever since then, I have been working on my own video game series, kind of under wraps. And so that's been over a decade in the works, so that's changed significantly since that was first conceived. But I have kept with it since 2005. So 12 years later, that same project, that same idea, video game idea, is still growing in development and has gained significant steam. From an education standpoint, I graduated high school in 2008. My college career has been 9 years, and it's been really wonky and all over the place. I started off at UC Santa Barbara as a computer science major, and I absolutely hated it, just because of the culture there, the party culture, but also because there was really no support for video game development there. They had computer science, but it was a pretty unforgiving, broad-ranged department. So the following year, I ended up transferring to UC Santa Cruz up in Northern California. UC Santa Cruz in 2010 was, at the time, one of the only UC schools known for a video game design program. I know UC Irvine now has that, but 7 years ago it was non-existent, and the only other Southern California alternative was USC. And I don't really come from a household of financial income that can support USC, as I'm sure a lot of people aren't. So it was Santa Cruz. Time up at Santa Cruz was only half a year. There was a lot of turbulence, a lot of personal issues. But the one thing that I did take from my time up north was game development programming. So in other words, actually writing scripts, coding for making a game actually run. So in terms of like the graphics, sound, event loops, a lot of the nitty gritty that goes into the actual gameplay programming. So following that, I came back to Southern California, finished up my general education at Pierce College, and transferred to Cal State Northridge. So I would then do 3 years at CSUN as an undergrad.
Okay.
And that leads to 2014. I should mention that during the time that I was an undergrad, there was no support whatsoever for video game development. So that a lot of that time there really had me like doubting myself, questioning myself. Has what I've been doing been worth it? Is this all just been a really stupid fool's errand? So there's a lot of self-doubt at the time. And of course, graduating, being a recent graduate, work is always a huge issue, and having to find, employment was a very big stress. And so coming out of college, it was very difficult to find any work, let alone game development work, computer science work, entry-level computer science. That's what led me to go back to CSUN for my master's degree in computer science in the hopes that, hey, I could get hired for a higher paying job or a higher salary rate. And so I've been doing that since 2015. So that has been that as far as education goes. As far as game development goes, though, I decided to use my thesis because the CSUN Masters for Computer Science has a thesis project attached to it. Mm-hmm. I decided to use that thesis project as a way of kind of bolstering my my own personal ambitions as far as creating a game, or in this case, creating a game engine that could be utilized for multiple games. The project, as it stands currently, didn't end up being a game engine. It ended up being more middleware for an existing game engine, but still kind of gets the same principles across of 8-bit, 16-bit, kind of that retro aesthetic feel, but in an authentic way. In other words, it's a hybrid of that authentic 8-bit feel combined with modern game development sensibilities. So things like widescreen graphics, shoulder button support, things of that nature, things that we as gamers take for granted nowadays that we couldn't really back in the 1980s, the 1990s. So that was the thesis project that I've been at for the last year, since 2016. Over the last year as well, I've also been a part of the game development club at CSUN, which I found out about entirely by coincidence. So I remember last year, spring 2016, they had their 48-hour game jam. So I saw a poster for that, and I decided to attend the meetings. I mean, the jam had already happened, but I thought, might as well start as soon as I possibly could. So that's when I started attending meetings. The following year, I got more involved in the leadership positions as an officer, which led to me being the president for this past semester, spring 17. The last little bit I'll mention is that in regards to my internship at Yacht Club Games, I first found out about Shovel Knight in 2015. Unfortunately, I didn't know about it back in 2013 when their Kickstarter campaign happened. That's one of my biggest regrets, because Shovel Knight is one of the most amazing games of this past decade. And so, yeah, I found out about it 2015. Yacht Club Games, the company, the developers, instantly became my top development company as far as fandom goes. And so last summer 2016, I applied for internship positions to a lot of different companies. I wasn't expecting to get a response back, but I thought, I might as well put myself out there and just give it my all. So my top preference for an internship was Yacht Club Games, but I also applied to some other companies, another of which was Way Forward. They're located out in Valencia, and they're most famously known for game series such as Shantae, Mighty Switch Force. They also do a lot of contracted work for Cartoon Network IPs. So they've done the Adventure Time games. They've developed it. They haven't necessarily. I don't believe they've published it, but they have developed them. But anyways, so I submitted my resume. I applied for those positions. Didn't really expect to hear anything back. And the only place that responded back to me was my top choice, Yacht Club Games. So that back and forth conversation started around November of last year. And we initially I was hoping to do a fall internship, but the fall semester was coming to its end at the time. So I went in for the interview. The interview went really well with them, okay. And we agreed upon a spring internship, a spring 17 internship. So for these last 18 weeks, from the beginning of January to the beginning of May, I've gone down to their office in Marina Del Rey as a gameplay intern. So that encompassed, working on tasks and exercises that were assigned to me by, their gameplay programmers, Ian Flood and David D'Angelo. And it was a very invaluable experience. It was the amount of information I learned working at a company that had a very visible presence in the industry was huge. I can't really put it into words right now, but there was just so much that I learned, and I mean we can talk about that in a bit more detail. But kind of to wrap this up, that's kind of where I am right now. Is just finished an internship, just finished the presidency, and now I'm finishing up my my education, my master's degree.
All right. So Josh, well, since Chris kind of answered a few questions that I was going to ask, I was wondering, while you were going to school as well, that you ever have any doubts or question your path, and at the same time, have you done any internships as well?
I've applied for a lot of internships. Have I done any? No.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's it's very hard to get an internship in my field. Very, very competitive. Like thousands of applicants, only a few chosen. And as far as have I ever doubted myself? Every time when I make art, I doubt myself. I'm sort of like it's never good enough. This sucks. I can do better. But I still try and push myself. I still try and get feedback from my peers. There will always be doubt with me, but I'll always keep pushing forward.
Do you ever? I mean, Josh, one more time, because Chris, you basically answered it for me, and I appreciate that. So my thing is, for the 3D modeling, have you done any game jams at all that fit the criteria that you?
Yes, I've hosted a game jam. I've been to a few. They're very rewarding and fun experiences. I'm glad Chris mentioned this. I've completely spaced my mind. I was the second game development club president for CSUN. So that helped a lot in getting things rolling in the game department for our college. And I hosted a video game tournament, or video game jam, 48 hours, to bring people together and just test it out, see if it's getting good. And we created a lot of great games. Chris just hosted the recent game jam, and it went really well. I participated in that. We made a really funny game. It's a great experience working with a team, being a captain if you're not a captain of your team, just sharing that experience, crunching for a deadline, and working really hard.
So for both of you guys, again, since you guys, worked on a few game jams, and Chris, you've returned, so of course you had to work with a team. My thing was, when you were working with a team, did you have any problems trying to talk to people and how to try to get things situated? Were there any problems, any concerns?
Yeah.
And if there were, how did you guys handle them?
Well, let me before I answer that, let me add on to what Josh just said. Is that he was the second game development club president. The first was Aaron Daly. I was the third, and we now have a fourth president for the fall 17 semester next year. So, just to give a little bit of a chronology to the CSUN Game Dev presidency. Okay. With regards to being in the game jam, that's another thing that was also a very substantial experience. I've been in 2 game jams with CSUN now, the fall 16 and spring 17. So in addition to hosting the spring 17, I also kind of participated in it. Mm-hmm. To add on to, or to answer now the question of teamwork, I'll start with my experience in game dev and kind of move up from there. I'm sorry, the Game Jam.
Okay.
With regards to the Fall Game Jam, I collaborated. I worked on a pixel game, an 8-bit, like an NES kind of puzzle game. For that, I collaborated with one other person. So I worked on the things that I'm talented at, which is, programming and pixel artwork. Mm-hmm. And this other guy focused on the things that he's talented at, which was, the audio and the sound effects. So that was our Chase, a mutual friend of Chase and mine, Caleb Andrews. So we worked on a puzzle game, and he did the music in chiptune, the authentic 2A03 chip. And I did mine, the pixel artwork actually following the 6A03 PPU standards of color. And it was good. The collaboration between us was really fluid. We were next to each other. We had our headphones on, obviously, so we were in our own little worlds. Okay. But, from time to time, we would, take them off and, just kind of check in with each other and, see what was going on. Go for, like, what direction should I go with this track? And so, dialogue like that. And by the end of the jam, we had all our work ready, and we had the completed prototype, I'd like to call it, of a game. So that was fall 2016. For spring 17, I just made a game on my own. So I was the one-man team. It was just a small, an Android, a mobile game, so it didn't really need any audio or anything really intense. It was a map-based exploration game. Okay. But yeah, so that was my experience in game jams. But with regards to like collaboration on other projects, Chase and I were actually involved in a Game Boy Game Jam last fall, shortly before said Fall 16 Game Jam. So he and I actually worked together and did exactly the same thing of an authentic kind of 8-bit Game Boy game, and Chase did the music. He was did all the direction in terms of the music, and so I just simply implemented it in. And so that also turned out good. He and I, were in good communication as far as, using Skype, or, if it involved having to be in person for a night to, just flesh out all the SFX. So that, stuff like that really work, things, whatever it takes to, get the work done. Which, yeah, heavy communication skills or strong communication skills are definitely an important thing. I've also done a collaboration with another one of our mutual friends for an iPhone game. That was over the summer, early fall. And so that was Lauren
Lord Brioche, the bread slayer. Be respectful.
So she and I worked on an iPhone game where it was essentially the same. You kind of get the pattern now. Putting my talents to the best use of coding, pixel art, having other people put their talents to the work of like audio, sound design. So same thing where she did the audio, and we got it done. So, in regards to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, if you can, could you tell the people the different games so that way they can at least look it up and maybe try it for themselves?
Yeah, I still have to update my portfolio website, which I will be doing this week. But if you go to arcade-renegade.com, that's my portfolio website where I'll have all of these projects, kind of a little web page for each of them. The game that I worked on with Lauren is called Floaty Toucan for iOS. It'll be coming out this summer. Okay. The game that I worked on with Chase is Floaty's Block Ball, which takes that same Floaty character and applies it to a completely different genre of gameplay. So that's more of a arachnoid breakout style game. And the game that I worked on with Caleb is Disco Dog Discord. And so that was that's the NES game. If anyone has played Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver, they have a mini game in that game called Voltorb Flip, which is essentially a hybrid of Sudoku and Minesweeper. That game is essentially the same exact gameplay, but with slightly modified rules. Okay. The other games that I've worked on, the one for this most previous game jam is Mafia Map Masquerade. That'll also be on the Google Play Store this summer. You get the naming schematic of illusion or alliteration. So those are just some of the projects that I've worked on kind of solo independently. But to kind of go further with to further answer your question though about like collaboration and communication challenges.
Yeah.
In the past, working on non-game projects, I have run into a lot of challenges, like in a like school course and stuff. So like for example, my senior project, it was a nightmare. That was really a nightmare project because I was in a team with 14 other people. So it was a 15-man team, and normally senior projects are only supposed to be 5 or 6 people. So it was very hairy. There was a lot of miscommunication, and honestly, I'm surprised I was even able to like pass that project. Or yeah, excuse me. That's one example. Other examples have been like other coding competitions I've been a part of in the past. CSUN, the computer science department, hosts a coding competition every February towards the beginning of the spring semester. And so I've been a participant in this in their annual coding competition for the 3 years I was an undergrad, and as a mentor for the past couple years as a master's student. During my time as an undergrad, it was definitely a lot of communication problems, either because I didn't know anything with regards to the software. For example, when the first time I did it, I didn't know anything about Android, and the other guy who I was, the other people I was with were like Android experts.
Okay.
So there was a very big skill discrepancy. Other times have been like different direction with what to do. Like, oh, I want to make a game that's like a Simon Says. And the other people are like, no, I want to make a game that has a different pattern methodology to it. And so there's been conflicts and turbulence there. But again, it's kind of, I guess I could say it's a gradient where, being someone who is introverted and shy, communication is a very difficult thing to achieve, a very difficult skill to master. And so I've definitely had my problems in that regard. And I feel that, just being in more projects, and not just projects, but projects where everyone is kind of on board with the idea and the skill set, I feel has been a big help in that regard.
Okay.
Of course, what this is all leading to is my experience with Yacht Club games. Because Yacht Club is a team. They are highly collaborative. It's a work hard, play hard kind of environment, and it's very positive and it's very healthy. Everything is transparent within the company, so everyone is in communication. Everyone is on the same page with what to do, with the direction to go. As I mentioned, my time there was under the supervision of the other gameplay programmers. So usually my work would consist of working on exercises or tasks related to gameplay programming, or writing pieces of code. Mm-hmm. Without getting into specifics or NDA, etc. So there were challenges in that regard. There were communication challenges, and one example could be, hey, focus on working on this entity exercise, and it has to do this, this, and this. And you should start by following this, and this steps, and try and go back and forth with what works and what doesn't work through testing. That would be an example of, say, an exercise, a daily programming exercise. The problems there would be that I would approach it and I would be completely lost. The reason I would be lost could be because it's code that I'm not familiar with, so I don't know the ins and outs of what, say, certain commands do. So it's kind of a matter of having to kind of walk through a hallway blind and having to like touch the walls to figure out your surroundings. That's kind of the best metaphor I can bring.
Hallway blind.
Hallway blindness. And so it was really a matter of trial and error, and it was difficult because there would be days where I would spend the entire time trying to figure stuff out and trying to pick up as much of the code functionality as I could, and I would have made no progress at the end of the day whatsoever. And so that was very anxiety producing for me. It was very stressful, very high anxiety, just because it's like, oh crap, I haven't done anything, my supervisors are going to think terrible of me, like I'm incompetent and that I can't do anything. And that's, kind of what did happen is, yeah, they were like, you're a shitty intern. They didn't say that exactly, but that was kind of the too long don't read version of it. Yeah. Okay. And so that, that made me feel really, really bad about myself. But eventually and this was more towards like the middle of the internship, not necessarily towards the end. Towards the end of the internship, things did pick up for the better. I kind of had to force myself to ask questions to them, like, am I on the right track? Am I, is this doing what it's supposed to? Is this piece of code, what exactly does it encompass? Is it okay for me to edit this file? And so questions like that. And I mean, in hindsight, or at their level of function, I would imagine that these are like really baby step questions, very, very redundant, very seemingly pointless questions to ask. And that's kind of how that was kind of the feeling that I got, was that I was asking really stupid questions, and I was, because everyone's working there. Everyone is, focused on a task. It's never a matter of you don't have people looking over your shoulder telling you what to do or not to do.
Right. Well, of course.
And so, it takes a lot of courage, at least for me it did, in, having to, ask them, even if it was like 20 times a day, like different questions, because, you don't want to be that person who asks a million questions and, suddenly, they also think negatively for you because you're asking too many questions. So it was really a matter of having to avoid asking no questions, having to avoid asking too many questions, having to strike the right balance, and at the same time, having to learn on the fly and, actually create functionality in the project that worked and that, you could test out and it didn't crash or anything. Okay. So it was a very anxiety inducing. I would say gameplay programming was definitely very high anxiety inducing. But on the same token, though, in this, I feel there was a progress in terms of communication and learning communication skills there. So that was the challenge that I did run into, and that was kind of, I don't know if it was the foolproof way of overcoming it, but that was the methodology that I applied.
All right, not bad. So Josh, I wanted to ask you the same question because I know you are an artist yourself, and I know how hard it is for artists when working on a group project. People can change their mind instantly and just like tear down one idea, or they might not like your idea, or they might tell you something and you might not be able to process it, but you try the best you can. So in that instance, how do you deal with working with a group of people, and how do you deal with the fact of like Chris said, there are going to be times that you'll have like a little bit of problem trying to talk to them and negotiate, but how did you work through that process? Or how did you work through it?
I've done a few game jams at college level, and most of the time I would be the most advanced person on the team, as in I would know how to get stuff done. First project I worked on was a pixel art project. It was a game called Cookie Knots, where you're an astronaut chef fighting aliens with spatulas, obviously. And I did most of the pixel art for that. I was working with another artist that never done pixel art before, so I was kind of helping him out while working with our main programmer. That wasn't very challenging since I was doing most of the art myself, but I would say it would be the next time I would do a game jam. One of my friends kind of dropped the ball, and he was one of the main programmers that would have helped us get the game complete and completely bug free, because in the end build there was a major bug that completely crashed the game if you did the one action, and that one action you had to kind of do in order to actually finish the game.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty difficult. You can't really predict what people are going to be like or what they're going to do, how they're going to act. And my third game jam experience, it was a really fun one. We were making a Mafia game. It was a third-person shooter, 3D. I did most of the 3D models and all of the texturing for that. And I was working with a lot bigger group, like a group of 5, something like that. I was working with other modelers that didn't know as much, so I'd have to tell them, hey, do you know how to UV layout? Do you know how to texture? And they usually don't, so they just make the models, and they send them to me. And when I get them, I'm, okay, this isn't really game ready, so I have to strip them down to its basic parts to make it so there's more performance in the game engine, and then texture them.
Okay.
So that was a little bit of a hassle, but I worked through it and tried to collaborate as much as I could with my other teammates. But it's always interesting, me being an artist, working with a programmer, seeing progress throughout the 48 hours of the game jam itself, and just building that bond of teamwork that really gets stuff done.
Okay.
Really great experience.
So, I do have like a little silly question to ask both of
Yeah.
you guys. What is your favorite game of all time, and what's your favorite game of 2017? So yes, I'm throwing in a silly question right here.
Oh my gosh.
You can take this first, Chris.
Okay, that's a terrible question to ask me because I have too many games that I love.
But you got to pick
Just
one.
Just say Pokemon.
Well, yeah, it is a Pokemon game, but which Pokemon game?
Yeah,
No,
of
just
all
say
time.
Pokemon.
Do I say Red and Blue because of the nostalgia? Do I say Heart Gold, Soul Silver because of the experience? Like,
Well, I mean,
Can
here's
we
the
name
thing. If you want, you can be like, well, I like Red of all time, and then you can say like 2017, I like Blue. Or, no, you can do it, man. Come on.
I feel like if I say Pokemon Red, Blue, specifically Red, like if that's my favorite game of all time because it was my first game, that I'd be kind of a nostalgia blind. So I'd have to say, like, you know, in my professional comparison contrast of the Pokemon franchise, I'd have to say Pokemon Heart Gold version, which came out in 2010, just because it was the most satisfying, fulfilling experience as a game, as you know, through as a progression. It was very colorful, good aesthetics. It was just very well paced. It did things. It kept true to the original Gold Silver, which were also fantastic. It added all the additions of Crystal version, the third upgrade version, and it also threw in a couple of new things as well. There were some things I didn't like the Pokeathlon minigame. I thought that was completely unnecessary. In addition to some other stuff, but you know, that aside, the gameplay, the audio direction, the graphics, everything about that was just flawless to me. And that's not to say that other Pokemon games are bad. There's obviously other great games out there, like, you know, Black 2, White 2, Platinum, Emerald version. Those are all fantastic. But you know, you're putting me in a rock in a hard place by saying your number one favorite.
Chris, I thought you were going to say Pokemon Snap.
But as far as my favorite game of 2017,
Yes.
I know I hate to sound like shameless self-promotion, but I'm going to have to go with Shovel Knight Spectre of Torment.
Look, there's nothing wrong with the self-promotions. If that's how you really feel.
But that's I'm not saying that for self-promotion. I'm saying that for the mobility of the game itself. The original Shovel Knight, you know, you were a guy who was, you know, pogoing through the stage. You're pretty standard run and jump type of game, run, jump, attack kind of game. But this game, if we were to compare the Shovel Knight mobility to the Spectre Knight mobility, and a lot of people have been saying this on like Twitter and Reddit, is that Shovel Knight is to Mega Man what Spectre Knight is to Mega Man X. So in other words, adding not just, you know, horizontal mobility and horizontal movement, but also vertical mobility and vertical movement. Suddenly now you have a character that can walk up walls, who can, you know, kick back and forth between walls, kind of like Ninja Gaiden or like NES Batman. And it really adds a whole new factor of gameplay, a whole new factor of, you know, can I just gallop up this stage or go up this shaft or get up to this really cool corner up here. The other thing too is, his aerial attack of, dashing through the air either upwards or downwards. I've noticed, like, I've seen a lot of people on YouTube, first when they first play Spectre Knight, that's something that they have trouble with is, I'm going in this direction and I'm not intending to go that way. But in fact, there is a way to control it, and it takes a little bit of practice. Once you have that practice down of, hey, I have to position myself below this enemy or above this enemy, it just becomes second nature, and it's really, really fun to perform. Okay. So overall, it's a very fun game to play. It's a very fun game to speedrun. And it's a very satisfying 2D platform experience. So I strongly recommend anyone to check it out. If you do have the original Shovel Knight from 2014, it comes as a free download. So
nice.
Yeah.
Josh?
Well, since this is such a lame question because there are so many games that are my favorite, I'm going to give you a lame answer.
That's not a lame question.
It is.
Everyone has their favorite.
Everyone has a couple favorites.
No, everyone has one favorite.
I'm going to give you Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
Because it set the standard for Zelda games in 3D. It was a masterfully done game. It was very beautiful, and there are some things going wrong with the dungeons, but I'm not going to get into that. But it was overall a really cohesive and great game. As far as this 2017, even though I have yet to purchase it, because I know it's going to take up most of my time, which I do not want, it's Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
So there you have it, guys. Buy a Nintendo Switch, Breath of the Wild, and Spectre of Torment.
Yeah, pretty much so far. Okay, so I do have one more question for you guys. What tips and suggestions would you give someone that's interested in, getting into the industry? For Chris, programming; Josh, artist, 3D modeling. What would you give to the listeners and the viewers out there?
Go on video game podcasts.
Yes.
You want to take this, Chris?
Sure. For programming people or for computer science, techie, etc., my recommendation would be to do as much as you possibly can in terms of what you're good at. So in other words, people that go into computer science, traditionally, you learn a language and then you learn another language, and it just kind of builds up from there. For me, the first language I learned was Java. I hated Java. I absolutely could not stand it. And I really wanted to get out of computer science right away because it was like, this is so complicated and I don't understand anything. I would imagine that a lot of people feel that way when they take a computer science class, is that it goes over their head. It also matters the professor that you take. But, for those of us who do either get it or pull through, which I eventually did, I eventually, took a different language and, hey, these concepts make better sense. Let me go back to Java. Oh, this all clicks and works together. And suddenly you have that solid foundation. So I feel like for a lot of people in computer science, they have that foundation where they feel like, hey, I'm good at this. I'm competent. I can expand my knowledge base. I can't speak for all computer scientists, but I would imagine that for the majority of programmers that this is something that they go through in their computer science education. So having said that, where do you apply programming languages to but to applications to write? So in that regard, people that are going to be going into the video game industry from computer science are most likely going to be focusing on graphical applications, things that have a GUI involved, a window, or some kind of an executable. So in that regards, I would say make as many applications as possible that have some type of a graphic aesthetic to it. And what I mean by that is, if it's making a simple application in like Java using the Swing library, or like a WinForm using C#, or anything like something in C++ using SDL. all these things are great learning experiences, and they're also good to put on coding interviews on your resume. But for more modern, for more relevant stuff, it really depends on whether you're going towards mobile or you're going towards like console or PC. Obviously, for mobile, you'll want to work on Android and iOS stuff. So, creating an application via Android Studio or Xcode, those are invaluable. And, there's a lot of resources out there for mobile development. And the more apps you make, the better. Because, again, everything that you're doing as a programmer, as a coder, is going towards an application or a resume, a portfolio. And so the more that you do, the more exercise that you get out of it, the more content that you create, the better. For the PC side of things, there's a number of different ways to go based on your preference. A lot of people are getting into stuff like Unity, Unreal, which is totally fine. That kind of this democratization of game development. And so in that sense, take your Java experience and go learn C++ or C# and make a Unity game or an Unreal game. And for those like myself who have a more of a preference towards 2D route, there are other stuff like Game Maker Studio, which uses its own GML scripting code, which is also very similar to like a Java Swift syntax. And so, yeah, there's a lot of options out there. It just really is a matter of going out and putting the time and effort in and the experience. Now, of course, doing all this is not something that you're getting paid for. It's not like some fairy's going to magically drop $1,000 because you made something in Game Maker. That's not how it works. How it works is that you create this content. You're creating content. You have a portfolio, a GitHub, a repository, someplace where people can check out your work. But while you're doing this on the same token, while you're creating content in whatever you want to pursue, you're also applying to places, whether it be game companies or even like smaller things, like some kind of a software position at a random corporate office. It really doesn't matter. Apply to these places, have all this content as your portfolio, as part of your interview, and from there's a very high chance that you're going to get the job. Employers are looking for people who are dedicated and that are willing to put the effort and time into projects. And they do that because more often than not, the job that you're going to be working is going to be with a group of people. So they want to see that, okay, yeah, you've done all this great work. Maybe now the next step is going to be, can you do all this work with a group of people? And of course, that's also another reason why game jams are so important, is because if you say that you're on a game jam, more often than not, an employer is going to ask, oh, tell me how that went. How did it work working in a group? If they ask that question, they're not doing that by coincidence. There's a specific reason why they're asking that question in an interview, because they want people that are going to work in teams that are hardworking and are able to produce content. So, as to say, again, all these tools are out there. It's just really a matter of how much time and effort are you going to dedicate into pursuing it. So that would be my advice to people wanting to program in the game industry.
Okay. Josh?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, what advice would you give someone, trying to be, a 3D artist or just an artist in general in the video game industry? Like, what can they do? What steps can they take? Where can they go, etc.?
My advice is very easy to know and understand, but very hard to master.
Uh-oh.
That's make games, go to events, talk to people, make connections. No matter if you're a programmer, an artist, a musician, whatever you are, just keep making things. Keep pushing yourself. Do content which you love, which inspires you. Talk to people, make connections, whether they even be your friends or outside your friend group, going to conventions, because perfect strangers, they're just not, they could be your friends, and you just don't know until you go up to them. have business cards, hand out business cards. I know my friend, Gamer Composer down here, he has a stack of business cards he always hands out at places. Yeah, it just network, make content, and try to promote yourself, even though you probably don't want to because no one likes promoting themselves.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, that is it for the interview. So, folks, we're going to take a small break, and when we come back, we're going to come in with the next topic. So, stay tuned. Now, we're going to get into True Story. It's like, this is where we like to talk about any video game stories that you had, good or bad, as long as it's exciting or not. But as long as it happened, true story. So, who wants to kick things off?
I'll go.
Yeah, I believe all Gamer Composer, me, or Chris can kick this off because I believe we all shared an event together.
We did.
You guys did.
So yesterday, May 20th, the first annual Southern California Student Game Developer Alliance Summit was held at Cal Poly Pomona. So this was a one-day conference where game development clubs from all across Southern California came together, and it was really fun. It was networking, a lot of networking. They had speakers, panels, a lot of workshops, and it was just a really positive experience all around. It had a really high turnout, and it was just a really good event. I was, being the president of the Game Development Club this past semester, was one of the organizers of the event, in addition to the other presidents from other clubs, so places like Cal State Long Beach, Cal State Fullerton, UC Irvine, UC Riverside. So all these different game development clubs, we've been in talks about this summit for the last 5 months, I want to say, since January.
Okay.
So we've been having weekly meetings where we would discuss the logistics, what speakers to bring, just essentially all the organization that goes into the event. So it was, I guess you could say that was like an additional commitment to, my already withstanding commitments this past semester. Okay. But yeah, it all kind of, everything paid off, all that planning, all that, organizing all those meetings. It all paid off yesterday, and it was, it really was a good benefit. For myself, when we left, we all kind of drove from, we took a caravan of cars and we drove from, CISA, from Cal State Northridge, all the way to Cal Poly Pomona. So that's about an hour 30-ish drive. And yeah, by the time we got there, the panels were getting underway. The workshops were getting underway. The panels were later in the afternoon. So for me, the workshops that I attended 3 of them. I attended one by Anthony Davis, who is a lead gameplay programmer from Obsidian Entertainment. So he talked on the subject of working in the game industry. And getting your feet in. So it was a very motivational, very inspirational talk. Cal State Fullerton did a workshop on game marketing, so on marketing a video game. And then there was, there was 4 panels, my bad. So those 2, there was also one by I forget her name. I believe she's a professor or an alumni from UC Santa Cruz. So she did a workshop on, I'm sure Josh knows more information on this. She did a panel on VR. Yeah. And then the last one that I went to was one from Hyperkin. Hyperkin is a company that does kind of retro game accessories. So they make stuff like the Superboy, which is a portable SNES. They've done the Retron 5, which plays, I think, 10 different retro cartridge, is capable of playing cartridges from 10 different systems, okay. And stuff like that. So they talked about kind of working in the retro video game industry, which, is already a niche of the already niche video game industry. So it was a very, very informative talk. So I felt I got a lot out of each of those workshops, specifically the Hyperkin and Anthony Davis workshops. Following that, there were 2 different panels. There was an industry panel. So the said guest speakers from different companies kind of convened and took questions, a Q&A from the audience. And then there was an alumni panel, which Chase and myself were a part of. So same format of, we kind of took in questions and answered them from the audience. And yeah, overall, after that, it concluded and we left. So yeah, if you guys, Josh, Chase, if you want to talk on that, your experiences.
Well, I believe the Anthony Davis was not a workshop; it was a presentation.
Right.
He was one of the guest speakers. So do you want to go, Chase, or do you want me to go? So it's a podcast. You have to speak.
Sure. Come on, Gamer Composer.
He's being silent.
Did his mic mess up? I think maybe his
Okay,
mic.
I'll just go.
All right, I think the mic.
So I got there. It was small rooms where people were showcasing their games, with laptops, like either professionally looking games or game jam games, whatever. It's just whatever students wanted to showcase, and the speakers went around and looked at those. So did everyone else. We played each other's games. It was a really good time. And once the workshops and presentations were going on, I went to a few presenters. First one was Andrew Robinson. He's one of the writers at Blizzard that does a lot of their content in comic books, cinematics, things like that. Very interesting talk. I really liked it a lot. He went on about how you can, by playing the games themselves, looking at the animations, getting a feel for the character, it makes it easier to write for that character, to understand them. And then I went to the same talk Chris went to, which was Anthony Davis, from Obsidian. He talked a little bit about his background, going from one job to the next until he got into the game industry at the age of 33. Which is, I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are when you enter the industry. It's whatever gets you there.
Okay.
Yeah. I should also really quickly... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go.
Really quickly, I should point out that Obsidian Entertainment, they're responsible for working on a lot of RPG, sort of Western RPG titles, so stuff like Fallout, Pillars of Eternity. So that's just an example of some of the content that company has created.
Okay.
Yeah. So his talk was about what to do to get into the industry, what it is like in the biz. So he gave us, he talked about the different professions, like not just artist or programmer, but producer, and just what different job titles it takes to actually get in the industry. Like, it's much easier for a programmer to get in there than an artist, but there's certain limitations with the programmer, as in they have to show their work right when they do the interview. But with artists, they have to look at the portfolio. They have to study their artwork. With a producer, they pretty much have to. It would be the easiest one to get into, but they would have to prove themselves that they can be a good producer. I thought that was a very interesting talk. After that, I went to Robin Tong Gray. She's a indie developer that's also doing a VR project. So she did a successful Kickstarter for her company, and she made a couple of games. They looked really good. One was a VR game that you're at a cafe, but you're a robot, and robots don't drink coffee, so you're kind of trying to figure out why you're there, and it's a whole VR experience. The other one's a haunted kind of game where there's a creepy doll that keeps moving around, kind of a scary VR game. But yeah, she talked about what it's like after graduation to go to the industry. She applied to AAA, but she felt it wasn't her thing, so she went the indie route. and that worked out really well for her.
Nice.
That was also the name of the person from Santa Cruz that slipped my mind earlier. So she's a UCSC alumni.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And these presentations were like, once one ended, the other one started. So you have to leave one room and go to the next. After that one, it was Thomas Jeck. He's currently working for Riot as an animation animation lead. But he was in college in 2008, and he gave a talk about all sorts of things that his true experience through what it took him to get through getting into the game industry. Okay. His first job was at Pixar, where he was an intern, and then he moved to Bungie and Blizzard, and then finally Riot.
Wow.
I believe he has his presentations online on his website, thomasjeck.com, and he also has a TED Talk.
Okay.
It was very informative. He talked about how criticism hurts you deep inside, but you have to get past that. How you think you're competing with other people that are better than you. It's like, his work's better than mine. But you can't do that. You have to push them as much as they push you to create artwork. He also talked about how even though failure can hurt you, it also defines who you are in the presence of failure, because it shows your true colors, and how learning is just not fun, but you have to do it. I thought his talk was very informative, very truthful, and interesting. After that, we just hung out for a little bit, had lunch, and the rest of the day was pretty relaxed. There was a end of the session panel where all of the guest speakers were on a panel, and we got to ask them questions and stuff. It was pretty nice.
Gamer, composer. Is the mic okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
So
you were doing all that on purpose then.
So where do I begin? I was there for the opening ceremony, and it was very nice. And from there, I managed to snag a spot for the showcase. So I ended up showing off the visual novel game Reality. And it was very well received. And even people who said they're not into visual novels got sucked in. And I was able to elevator pitch the game very well to people, and they enjoyed it quite much. And from there, I met a couple like-minded sound people that were interested in getting into game audio. So I did a slight mentoring with a gentleman named Daniel Kim, and I believe he goes to UC Long Beach. And I was just basically telling him things that I had learned throughout the 6 years of being in the industry, and he appreciated that. And so we connected, and I told him to keep in touch. And from there, I went to a talk with a friend of mine named Vincent Diamante, who works at That Game Company. And his talk was about game audio designers from Venus and game designers from Mars. And it was more of understanding the roles between one another and saying how we're not that different from one another, and how we can collaborate better through certain types of communication, and understanding the roles of what each discipline does in a nutshell. It's a very eclectic talk. It's really hard to articulate. If he ends up posting it, or if Sigda ends up posting it somehow, if you search the hashtag SGDA 2017, it may or may not show up. But that was a very interesting talk. I cannot even articulate it because it was so interesting. He didn't even use the slides because it was just ended up being so organic. And from there, I went to a VR talk, and the team ended up showing how you can create a VR game pretty much like within an hour by downloading certain assets, certain dev kits from the asset store, and just basically having like a mini shooter like right there in front of you with the HTC Vive, and it was pretty cool. I didn't know that you could do it. I mean, I had asked the question how they did it in like a team of 4, but they said you could do it in a team of 1 if you wanted to. You know, with as terms of setting up collisions and camera angles and such, it was actually, I was very impressed. And like Chris and Josh has said, then there was a guest speaker Q&A, and then there was the alumni Q&A, which me and Chris was on, and that was the end of the summit.
I should addendum really quickly that as Josh had mentioned, and the game showcase before the guest speakers, Josh, Chase, and myself all presented the games that we've done individually at that showcase. So all of our content was well received. Chase was showcasing Reality. Josh was showcasing his Mafia game, Mafia Mamba, I believe it's called, and I was showcasing 2 of the games that I'd done, the PC ones, the Block Ball and the Disco Dog games. So all these games were very well received by all the attendees that were touring the projects. So
nice. Yeah, nice.
Cool.
Celebrity status.
Oh,
All right. Well, that was a good true story.
Also, really quickly, I just realized you had said UC Long Beach. It's actually Cal State Long Beach. So, correction.
Gamer Composer?
Thank you.
All right, folks. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little small break, and then we're going to, wrap things up. So stay tuned. Hey, guys. Welcome back. And unfortunately, it's that time of the show where we have to say goodbye. But before we do, it's time for selfless plugins. Go.
All right. So I've been, for those of you who keep up with Kickstarter campaigns, indie Kickstarter campaigns, one that was recently successfully funded is by the name of Eagle Island. And it is a 16-bit 2D platformer game. And so this game has a lot of potential to it. It really had a good promotional video. It's created by Nick Gregory, and so this is something to keep an eye out for. It's gotten a lot of high praise. It was funded successfully a few weeks ago. So just as kind of a indie radar, keep that in mind. Eagle Island.
Nice.
So
cool.
Did you want to give out your contact information?
Is that, yeah. As far as like upcoming stuff, before I give contact, upcoming stuff, next month I will be at E3, so at the LA Convention Center. I believe Chase and I will be there. So next time you hear from us, we'll probably be talking about our E3 experience. So that's kind of a look forward. As far as contact info and stuff goes, my website is www.arcade-renegade.com, so Arcade Renegade. So there you can find all the different game projects that I've talked about today, as well as like different social media links. So it's kind of a little inactive, but things will be picking up momentum this summer on like the social medias, etc. So like the Facebook page is facebook.com/arcrensoftware. Twitter handle is arcade_renegade. And some other ones I can't think off the top of my head, but yeah, so that's my contact info, and yeah.
All right. Josh.
There you go.
Yes.
So, yeah, my stuff's not really, my portfolio is not really complete-ish yet. So if you want to get in contact with me, I'm a really good 3D artist. I also do 2D stuff as well. You can bug my friends Chase or Chris.
Wow. Your plug-in is hey, if you want to contact me, get at the other people. Blow up their inboxes.
Yep.
Damn. Josh, you shine so bright, man. No wonder you put on the shades. Yep. Gamer composer.
Check us out, Chronicles of Gamers, on Twitter, and email us. Thank you, VidMe community. We really appreciate it.
Shout out to the VidMan.
Shout out to Lord Brioche.
Brioche. Yo, man, she's slaying some bread right now. She's having some trouble in their kingdom. That's why she's not here. She's laying down the law.
Eating too much bread.
I don't know, man.
You can never have too much brioche.
Oh, you can never have too much bread?
You
Okay.
can never have it.
We can never have much brioche. It's specific. But
Specifically
yes, she will return. And yeah, that's it. That's about it.
Yeah, man.
Nice.
Please, Chronicles Gamers, Facebook. You can join the Facebook page.
Facebook's been live lately.
Yeah, it's been live. We've been getting them hits. So, of course, send us your energy. Send us your love.
Spirit bomb.
Yes. Follow the group, and if you follow the group, there's something special is gonna happen. I'm gonna let you know next episode. Don't worry. So I would say follow the group. Something big's about to happen. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I'm out of here. We're out of here. So
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Yes,
stay
thank
lit.
you.